I'm Christy. Today I want to talk to you about how to share just enough. When your loved one has special needs, it can be really tricky to know if you should share things with them or not. If you decide to share, then how much do you tell them? How do you word it so that they'll best understand it? How do you balance what they should know because of their age versus how much they'll understand because of their abilities? As I regularly say, special needs tends to really complicate so many aspects of life. Now, I know this is a bit different than most of what I talk about on this blog, but I've had several different things come up recently, and they've really gotten me thinking about how much I should tell AJ, or if I should even tell him at all. And if I do decide to tell him, how do I word it in such a way that he'll understand? And what if I do, and there's just no way that he will understand or process what I'm trying to say to him? Oh, the conundrum of special needs. It's so hard to know how to answer these questions. And honestly, I think a lot of it depends on the specific situation. Now, I'm not sure you can make broad generalizations in this kind of a situation. I know that there are some issues that I'm willing to pick the battle over, so to speak. And they're a big enough deal that I'll address them and hope I can get through to AJ. Now, other issues aren't important enough or aren't worth the battle, so I'm more likely to walk away and leave the issue unaddressed. So how do I decide which way to go? That's a great question. And I wish I had a great answer for you. Unfortunately, it's still a bit of mush in my mind. But here are some things that I consider when I'm looking at these kind of issues. First of all, is this an issue that I need to choose to go to battle over? Now, sometimes the answer is a clear yes, and I know that I have to address it. Other times, it's definitely not worth the battle, and I'll choose to walk away. Now, is this something that AJ is likely to easily understand and react to? I had an issue arise where I was fairly certain that AJ wasn't going to understand or process what we wanted him to do. Now, of course, this realization didn't happen until we were in the middle of the battle. But as I looked back, I realized he simply had no comprehension of why we wanted him to do what we were asking. He couldn't process our request. He had his mind made up, and there was nothing we could do to change it. We had to choose to walk away. Now, other times, we can explain that this is what we want or need him to do and why. Now, he may not like what we're saying, but sometimes we can get him to cooperate. Now, that cooperation may include lots of comments about how he's not happy about it, but he's still doing what we ask, and so we let the rest go as best we can. Finally, is this issue not important enough to even raise with AJ? Now, sometimes when I consciously consider the issue, I realize it's not worth the effort to even tell him about it. It might be that I know he won't process what I'm telling him. Or maybe he'll refuse to comply and I don't want to battle him over it. Or maybe it's just not that significant and I know that he'll go along with whatever we decide. Whatever the reason, some things we simply decide for him and go on with life. And life is much smoother for everyone in most of these instances. If we decide to tell AJ, the way we tell him, the words, attitudes, tone, etc., can have a great impact on how well he receives the information. Just like everyone else. The big difference, in many times, the what and how we tell him is very different than if he were typical. For example, if we're going out to eat, AJ rarely knows or cares where we go. Now, he'll ask us, but if we turn the question around on him, he'll typically say, "I'm not sure." Now, sometimes I'll ask if he wants me to pick where we're going and pick his food for him. Typically, he says yes. Now, other times, knowing that this is how AJ usually responds, we'll simply decide and order for him. Then, when he asks what we're doing for the meal, we'll tell him where we ordered from and what we ordered him. It's almost always met with acceptance. Now, obviously, if he were typical, he'd most likely have much more of an opinion, and we'd include that opinion in our decision-making process. All right, here's another example. A few years ago, we decided to take vacation out of state. Now, we didn't mention anything about this to AJ. We made our plans and bought the tickets. Then we told AJ. And he wanted absolutely nothing to do with this trip, to the point that we barely got him in the car to head to the airport. And he had an attitude all the way through the airport. Once we got to the gate, we told him to knock it off, and we were going, and we couldn't take him back home. Fortunately, once he chose to change his attitude, we all had a great trip. But I learned that we need to include him in the planning process. So my question for you this week is this. How do you decide what and how to tell your loved one about sensitive topics? Have you learned any good tidbits to help others? I'd love to hear them. You can leave me a comment below, or you can leave me a comment over on the blog. That's at www.havenofhopeforme.com. This originally posted in June of 2021. I'm balancing the choices I make carefully so that I can continue to say that life is good and there is never a dull moment.